Hello there, this is Fiona, host and main GM for What Am I Rolling, a twice-monthly RPG one-shot podcast. This is a bonus Q&A episode to tide us over to the next one-shot, and it is indeed a very special Q&A, as a few months back I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Ben Costa and James Parks, the creators and game designers of Land of Eam, a tabletop RPG based on their fantasy graphic novel series Rickety Stitch and the Gelatinous Goo. Many of you will know that I recently ran a one-shot of Land of Eam on this very podcast. That's episodes 77 and 78 if you want to check it out. I have to say, it was an incredibly fun RPG to run. I really enjoyed how easy it was to learn and how it allowed my players to be as creative as possible with their decisions. The world itself is incredibly rich and open, and it feels very different to other fantasy RPGs I've been playing recently. I can also highly recommend the Rickety Stitch graphic novel series too, with the third instalment just published last month. Finally, the Kickstarter for the full Land of Eam rulebook will be coming out towards the end of the year. But for now, you can download and try out the beta quick start rules on Drive-Thru RPG as a pay-what-you-want product. I'll put links to Ben and James's work and recommendations on the What Am I Rolling website and in this episode's show notes. You can find out more information about Land of Eam and join the official Discord server on the website. That's www.landofeam.com. All right, well, let's begin. Could you tell us a little bit about yourselves? Who are you and what do you do? And either one of you can go first. I appreciate it. Usually it's just one person in the call, and I'm like, okay, there's two of you now. So either one of you can go first.
Yeah, we're so good at trying not to talk over each other, like when we're answering these things, because we're sort of like a two-headed giant whenever we're in these things. But I am James Parks, and that is my counterpart.
I am Ben Costa.
There you go. See? Perfect example.
We're the creators of the graphic novel series Rickety Stitch and the Gelatinous Goo. Mm-hmm. We write it together. I'm the artist. And we are also making a role-playing game called Land of Eam, which is based on the comic, the world of the comic.
Yeah, I'd say inspired by, because it's like you don't need to be familiar with the series to enjoy the game. It's just they share a world. They share a world and a tone for sure. Most people don't know that Ben and I have known each other for over 25 years, and like our creative collaboration began when we were in the second grade, which is kind of unique and fun. We used to not only read comics and play Dungeons and Dragons together for most of our lives, but we also would create comics, and that's how we got into, Rickety Stitch stuff. We would make these crude, construction paper Spider-Man comics. Where Spider-Man would like team up with Shaquille O'Neal and save the city of New York and like crazy stuff. And that it just inevitably, we were close buddies and we were roommates in college, and we started making comics together officially in college, including, Rickety Stitch stuff, like little shorts.
Yeah, and that's when we came up with the character first.
Yeah,
and, took like 15 years to get it off the ground and published. But,
yeah, a lot of people don't know that either. It wasn't just instant. It was Rickety Stitch was gestating for a while, and there was a big period where we didn't work on the character or the series, and it kind of all came into fruition when 2016-ish.
2017 was the first.
2017
came out.
Yeah, the first book came out in 2017, and now we're on book 3. Comes out in April.
Oh, amazing. So role-playing games then, and you mentioned sort of Dungeons and Dragons. How long have you been playing that? And presumably you both have GM'd or DM'd for each other or have done it separately. So tell us about your experience about that.
We started in 4th grade. So our friend Mir, who is now like a hugely successful video game designer, he's always been our dungeon master in that like core group that we have of like, 5 other guys, and
who we've also known our whole lives.
And we still play D&D with. That's kind of where we started. It was 2nd edition D&D. And I didn't start game mastering until college, I don't think. James has only done it a few times.
Yeah, I've done it the least. I've definitely not done a lot of game mastering. I think post-college, I did it maybe half a dozen times. So not a lot.
Yeah, it was sort of like this scary jump from going from a player to a GM.
Right.
Especially when like our one friend had done it for, 15 years or whatever. Maybe not that long, but 10 years before we started.
So was he DMing the same campaign? Was it all little different campaigns? Were you playing the same characters or like Descendants and stuff?
Oh gosh.
There were several campaigns, but some
Several
of them were
campaigns. Yeah, we had a big one, like a giant 3-year campaign that was giant for us. I know there's people that have been playing for 10 years and it's amazing. But we had like a 3-year one in high school and a ton of small ones. And then more and more recently, the campaigns are shrinking and shrinking so that there's just like hundreds of characters being generated like all the time, which is something we also enjoy to do. We just love to riff and create a bunch of characters.
Yeah, so we played second edition D&D for many years beyond like when third came out. We didn't play it. We just kept going with that. And then Amir Rao, he's Supergiant Games. He made his own system basically that we've been playing still for like 20. I don't know. I keep saying 20 years.
To be fair, time is such a thing at the moment. It's like,
yeah, right.
So
anything over 5 years is many.
Yeah,
like for many years.
More than you think. So yeah,
many years.
I think 15 years we've been playing this like system that he's made, and he's, it's kind of like how I got the game design bug, so I would sort of help him kind of generate some ideas, and he would go off and actually make it at one point.
Then there was that huge stretch of time where we would start generating random tables together, and that really inspired me to just challenge myself creatively to create tons and tons of characters and quest hooks and items and places, and that's already something I love to do just when doing regular storytelling, like with Rickety Stitch or something. But it kind of spiraled out of control when the homebrew stuff really started to become core to us playing. And like Ben said, like he started generating his own rules, and we started just homebrewing everything, practically everything actually.
This like all came together to inspire like what Land of Eam is, and like how we approach the game design. We really want to make a game that allows players to be creative. They can just make stuff up in the world and have it be true or not. So that's like a huge thing.
Well, let's talk a bit about Land of Eam then. So tell us a bit about Land of Eam, and because obviously, as you've rightly alluded to, that it is based on your comic book, your graphic novel series. What kind of makes it stand out to other sort of fantasy RPGs that are out there just now?
Well, to go along with, the idea that players can be creative and make things up, like a lot of real estate of like what a character can do is given to abilities that are that allow you to be creative, as well as like the tone, I think, is kind of unique. It's sort of like we described as like the Muppets meets Lord of the Rings. So you have these colorful, cute characters going around, high fantasy adventures, and they can run into dark lords, and so there's kind of that, juxtaposition there.
Yeah, there's definitely a tone shift that the game shares with Rickety Stitch that folks really enjoy, which is that you've got these Muppets that are going up against Sauron or whatever, and it's a kind of theme that Ben and I have always like really enjoyed, and going back to like the homebrew stuff that like really inspired us to create Land of Eam. I think one of our primary goals with Land of Eam was to really focus on the collaborative storytelling of RPGs, because Ben and I have never been the kind of characters, well, that too, but they've never been the kind of players who were all about like maximizing or minimizing and getting into fisticuffs. Like, we are not the murder hobo type of gamer, and we actually prefer wacky solutions for everything, not getting into combat. And so Land of Eam really leans into that, just like having a lot of different options for what you can do. And those creative powers, like that Ben was talking about, make an impact in the world. It's like, now that's true. You've just joined the storytelling elements with not only the whatever quest you're reading or sandbox you're reading, but also what the GM is creating. So it's working together to make the story so that when you're laughing about it, like later, everybody's like really invested into that stuff.
Yeah, our instinct was always to follow the fun as opposed to doing the most optimal thing. Like rather like make an interesting story and have characters be interesting.
I definitely got that, because there's a part in the quick start thing where you talk about the different adventure tones, and I had to write down what they said. There's a hijinks, nerdu, and doom and gloom as to sort of the levels of what kind of adventure it is. And I think that's so well, smart. I appreciate this is very self-congratulatory. It's like, that's really smart, guys. Thanks for that. But it's so true, because I think sometimes you have that thing where you're like, I want to play this kind of D&D game, and it's going to be adventures and sword fighting and stuff. And that's like your ideal, perhaps, as a DM. But compared to the player's reality of like, I'm just going to try this. And it works. So I rolled really well. And I think what's really nice is that obviously nowadays, a lot of people are doing more session zeros and like trying to say, well, this is what the kind of game I want to play, but what is it that you want to play, and giving that sort of trust relationship to this. And that's what I really like about the Land of Eam stuff, is that, yeah, the collaboration is there, and it makes you think outside the box. Because again, these aren't from the obviously the world of the graphic novels and stuff. These aren't typical adventurers. They're what some people consider monstrous adventures, because obviously you have a main character is a skeleton, their best friend is a gelatinous goo. You know, it's exactly. it's that sort of that twist on it, I think, and that's what I think a lot more players now want those options to try. So that's what I've seen the adventure tones. I was like, this is nice, because you can pitch it to any kind of player who will be like, you know what, I just want to have a bit of fun right now, and I don't need to have I can do the serious Dark Lord min-maxing video game type of game if I want to, but also I could also have fun, and each individual experience is so different. And I just thought the adventure tone and how to pitch it to people was really, really cool.
Cool, thank you.
You kind of reminded me of like being, I don't know, in middle school, getting one of the source books for AD&D second edition, and like seeing that you could be a kobold and like feeling like the happiest I've ever felt. I get that idea. Like,
happiest I've ever felt.
Like I wanted nothing more than to be a kobold. I enjoy, being monstrous characters. I never want to be a human in anything for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know what that says about me, but
it's interesting now, certainly looking at most fantasy things, but like in Pathfinder, and obviously with D&D, I mean, the big overlord of everything. But the way they've gone, the majority of people are humans, but here are all the other species or other races you can be. So many other people just go, right, sod humans, what else can I be? And being able to just try them out and try something that's so different to what people would expect is the norm. And I think just being able to try it out and be the kobold you want to be, or be the goblin, or be the Aarakocra, or the goo. I just think it's so nice and refreshing, because there's maybe again there's the min-maxing things that I am a hero, I gotta do this. I think quite a lot of us in real life, we have that imposter syndrome, or we have those sort of like flaws, and we worry that people see us. And so when you're a different person, so different to your own, whether that's through race or like traits or something like that, but then you're also forced to be like, well, you must save the day, and you're like, yes, but there are limitations, or something like that. I just like it, and like you said, it's like that sort of ability to just have a little bit more of a different storytelling that's so unique to you. So yeah,
just be the goo you want to be, I think is
be the goo.
Yeah.
You better trademark that and put that on t-shirts. I know obviously when you designing and creating Rickety Stitch, and then obviously moving that over to into an actual role-playing game, what were your sort of biggest influences when you were designing that? I mean, obviously that you've talked about playing D&D and stuff, but was there any other sort of like places you took it from, I guess?
A big influence is Dungeon World, even though I think I've only played it once, but just in an Apocalypse World in general, the dice system was really intriguing, as well as Fantasy Flight Star Wars game. That kind of influenced the dice system as well. So Land of Eam has a D12 system instead of 2D6, because we wanted more variance and not always, coming up on the 7 to 9 range.
I think one influence, which is like similarly to how we tell stories, or like why Rickety Stitch ends the way it ends, or ends up being the way it ends up being, is because we like kind of chased our own play style and what we liked when developing Land of Eam, like rewarding your flaws, because using a flaw in a moment actually adds to the drama, or adds to the chaos, or adds to the fun, and makes it feel like you're part of a narrative where there's twists and turns, as opposed to, just did I succeed or not succeed? It's, did I succeed, but something happened, or something didn't happen? Was there a twist? Was there, how did this work out? And that kind of like, even when we play other games or homebrew games, we'll sometimes introduce our own flaw or our own negative to kind of propel the story into a fun place, or work together to make something unique.
Yeah, playing to your flaws, I think, again, that takes it another step away from the min-maxing edgelord type characters, I think. Because you had games like Fiasco or anything like that, where these things drive the story forward and stuff and have the twist. Yeah, I was going to mention the D12 system. The best dice, obviously, is the D12.
Yeah, so underused,
I mean, the D12.
Just the rolling capacity on it is unmatched. It can go for miles.
Again, like you said, so rolling the D12, you have the sort of the 5 different stages of success, as it were.
Yeah.
So obviously, complete failure to critical success. And then what I really liked was obviously the failure with a plus, or a success but with a twist. And I think it's so nice to see that in a game where a lot of the time when it comes to numbers and stuff like that, you roll and go, I did a 15. And it's like, well, that doesn't really translate well to story, because that leaves it to the GM who's running it. Whereas this is like the success, but there's a twist. There's something bad that happens. That's so nice, because like you said in the quick start stuff, it's like if you're struggling as a GM, ask the players what it can be, and having that back and forth stuff. Because I think they're not going to be like, well, I'm not gonna take this. It's like you did succeed and you move the story forward. And I think that was the key thing I took away from your quick start rules, was saying like you always move the story forward no matter what happens. And my goodness, that helps so much, because the amount of times you're like, I'm just going to keep rolling until you get the number you want, that takes away completely from the story that people want to create. So yeah, I just thought that was such a nice thing to do. And again, going back to what you were saying before, James, about the tables, there are so many tables. I had a quick look at the rule book after I ran through the one shot. My goodness, that's amazing. I love it. And it was cool. And being able to, I think in the game itself, you did put a note saying like the GM doesn't need to roll that many dice, that's all on the players and stuff. But I like the fact when you're doing the prep of it, you get to roll so much dice as a result to like do the treasure hoards and stuff like that. So I quite liked how you like, no, you still get to roll, but before the game, you don't need to do that much in the game.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's one thing we can offer as designers, in quotes, is random tables. We're just good at generating content for random tables for some reason. Goes back to James mentioned that we did that for our homebrew game, like as a group in college. So in that group, we have, thousands of things on a table, and we're just, taking a page out of that book. And yeah, just to touch on the dice and the gradations of success and failure, it takes a little bit of buying in the whole group to like be on the same page, like being open to failure and having that like not just mean that you're dead. It just an interesting story direction.
It's the same thing with successes with a twist or negative. You leap out of the snake pit, but one of the snakes latches onto your shoelaces and you take it out with you or something like that. And what we've seen when doing play testing or playing with other groups is that once there is buy-in for this concept, everybody has fun coming up with the thing that affects them negatively and getting the reaction out of the other players who are like, oh my gosh, now this is going on. And that's, I have a blast with it. And I know that another friend of ours who plays with us on our live stream every Saturday, George, he loves it too. And he like particularly loves it though. He's almost like obsessed with
always trying to find a flaw.
Yeah, he's always doing that.
The other part of the game I wanted to kind of talk about briefly was the conflict phases, or before you go into combat. This interview will go out after the one shot is out and thing. But what's interesting is that you have the 4 phases of conflict. So you have the first one, you ask the players who would like to try and talk to the creature first. And anyone who does gets to go first. And then you move on to taking an action that doesn't necessarily involve combat, then running away, and then fighting, and making fighting the last resort. And I think that's so important, because sometimes I always have a big sinking feeling when I read role-playing games, and there's always a big section that goes combat, and you go, no, I want to experience. And I just feel like, again, maybe it's just the way fantasy games are, a specific fantasy genre or sci-fi or that sort of, there's always a bit about combat, you versus them. and not necessarily, it's like, oh, you have to kill them. And having that as the last resort. And I think you say in the rules as well, saying like, these are big creatures, you're not suitable for fighting them and you shouldn't be fighting them. I think it's so important so that the players should be thinking of other ways to do it. And now not all creatures can be talked to or talked down from it, but it adds that element of like, if you try it and it might succeed, that is just amazing. And being able to talk to like a massive king rat that wants to take over Wally's, and you're like, did it work? And you go, roll for it, and then we all go, kind of. You still have to do a little bit of fighting, but not as much as we thought, And I just thought it's just nice that you had to put it in an order of saying like, okay, who wants to talk? Because they get to go first. Because sometimes I've discovered, people are fighting it, and then there's always someone who goes, wait, we don't need to fight after two rounds of fighting. And you're like, no, it's too late now.
Totally. We've all been there. Or someone just comes up with an idea later or something. And so if you make it into a system, then everybody has a moment to really assess it.
And also, because again, the speaking part, I think is because people go, oh, that's really cool. But actually, I think the equally, if not more important one is the sort of the action that's not related to fighting. So it's not using. So if your character, you're like, I don't really have anything to say to this creature we're about to face or be able to win this particular encounter, but being able to look around the environment and go, I want to try and cut the chandelier and see if that falls on them. That sort of thing. I think that's really cool because, again, I think people get lost in the mechanics of like, well, my character can do this and not necessarily listen to the world around, especially with Land of Eam, which is such a creative, flavorful world that you want the players to get immersed in so that they use that environment and help them make their choices. So I just thought that was really nice to have that up with talking as well. Because, again, not many people do that. If they do, it's like an afterthought for action where you go, well, I could hit the person, but I could also, I guess, do this. Is this possible? And then there's more rolling and you're like, oh, takes it out of it. So I just thought that was really cool.
Yeah, we wanted to reflect the graphic novel series in that, like, Rickety Stitch, the Skeleton Bard, his first option is not going to be, slay the monster. It's going to be, how can I talk my way out of this? Or, we can't take full, this system sort of inspired, I forget exactly how, but it's like the exact mechanics of Doctor Who, which I've never played but read it. It was a Doctor Who role-playing game where they kind of had phases to a conflict, and it because in designing the game it was like, how can we make this work? And Doctor Who was an influence there. I don't exactly remember how, but it was.
No, but I think that's actually quite interesting because as a self-confessed Whovian myself, the Doctor always tries to talk their way out of it. They don't have a weapon. They have the sonic screwdriver to get out of the there's the sneaky sort of ex machina to get out of the ship at the last minute, but it's not a weapon. It's not a laser gun or anything like that. And the Doctor normally says that actually that's not okay, or will argue with someone if they go in with force. So yeah, I totally see that. It's been a long time since I read the Doctor Who role-playing game. I think for me with the Doctor Who role-playing game, I liked it up to the point where it says, oh, well, one of you can play the Doctor. I was like, no, only the GM can play the Doctor. That's how it works. Not any pleb in your group.
Isn't there a Batman game where like one person can be Batman and everyone else is like Alfred and Robin or something?
But that's such a shame because then there's always someone that has the spotlight.
Yeah. What are you in the Batman game? Well, I'm not Batman, but I'm his driver. I take him to lunch. That's what I do.
I think I would actually enjoy that game. Just the person that drives around superheroes to their thing.
Actually, yeah, you're right. If everyone isn't the superhero and it's just like all the support team, that could be super fun.
Yeah, exactly. It was a long time ago now. One of the earlier episodes we ran, we did Fate Accelerated, and I made it so that everyone was the superhero bureau in London, and all the A-list superheroes have actually been taken to like HR training because there'd been a big incident. And so it was only the B superheroes that were on the desk who don't go out. And then they had to go, and then there was like, I can't remember, they had to go do certain things to pass a certain test. And they were like, but they had rubbish powers as a result, or what they thought was rubbish powers. But then again, that creative way of like, we stop the robbers by, I just blow smoke from my hands because that's what I do. And no one can see where anyone is. It doesn't help me. So
that's super fun.
So speaking of sort of RPGs then in general, do you have any particular favorite RPGs that you've played in or want to play in, or you've read and gone, that would be really cool? Any sort of thing like that?
Good question.
I'm super into Star Wars RPGs. Played a lot. I've ran a lot as a game master, and I went so far as to create my own system.
Oh, nice.
Like made my own Star Wars RPG.
It's really cool.
But it's only for, my friends and I. I'm not going to publish a Star Wars RPG, but
you just give it a different name.
It's kind of probably will at one point if we do like a
Star
sci-fi
conflicts. And you talk your way out of everything.
We do a sci-fi comic, this will be the system. It's kind of like an amalgamation of D6 Star Wars and just like D20 Saga Edition. It's kind of everything, but then, including our own sensibilities that we've developed as we've been talking about. Some of the abilities from Land of Eam were just pulled directly from
like
there.
Creative solutions, like adding to the collaborative storytelling to solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
And then AD&D 2nd edition. I have a group that's separate from James that I play weekly, and we, for some reason, this group also wanted to play 2nd edition. I think it's just we're old, and like that's what we grew up with. So we also had like this 2-year 2nd edition campaign. For some reason, no one I know wants to play 5th edition. And so James and I have only done one session of 5th edition, which might sound crazy to you.
Would you ever be interested in doing more 5th edition, or is it just something or is it just like, we're happy with 2nd edition, just out of interest?
Yeah, I'd be open to it just to experience it.
Right.
I mean, I've only ever played 5th edition myself, but it's always one of those things where I've looked back. I played Pathfinder, the 1st edition. I know 2nd edition came out. And I ran that for the channel as well. And I was like, "Ooh, there's a lot." And then it turns out, obviously, there's not that much more to remember. So that's what I assume is that you just need to make accommodations for stuff. And obviously now online, when you've got like online dice rollers and all that sort of thing, it helps those who can't count in their head and has to use fingers and write stuff down. But yeah, I think I don't know. Like I'm very grateful for D&D 5th edition because it got me into playing role-playing games. I've not been playing that long myself. Actually, I've said it several times on the channel, but I think it'll be coming up to 5 years since I've started playing, and then 3 years since I've gone, this is fun, but also I'd like to read all of these books and run my own stories and stuff. So I think that's one thing I've always said, is that I've always enjoyed reading other people's ideas and worlds, and that is a different system to the D20 system, because sometimes like it's interesting because I feel like the D20 system is just one of those things where it's like if I hear it's a D20 system, I assume it's going to be fantasy and it's going to be medieval-ish or something like that because of its connections to D&D, which I know is not necessarily true, but it's just so nice when obviously looking at yours, I was like, a D12 system, ooh, and then I just want to find out more about that, so
some recent favorites. I've been playing currently Monster of the Week, which is fun. It's basically, we're just like a ragtag group of Ghostbuster-like people. James and I also played Ghostbusters.
I was just about to say like that I've wanted to play the Ghostbusters RPG since I was a little kid.
Like the one from the 80s.
Yeah, the one from the 80s. And so we found like copies of it and played it over Halloween, and
amazing.
That like lit a fire under me to want to play more Ghostbusters RPG because I love the tone. It's a funny book. It's like a funny RPG.
Well, definitely, and certainly with like Monster of the Week as well. Then there's that sort of, I know that they talk about like Angel or Buffy, that idea that you have a group and stuff, but it's all about collaborative storytelling as well. So I can only just imagine that being actually really cool and you inventing stuff on the fly. It's not so, again, the GM helps facilitate it, but it is more about the players and their investment to it. So, good suggestions. So I guess obviously this is whilst you've got lots of experience in playing in RPGs, and this is your and you've dabbled in game design for different things, but this is your first sort of published thing based on your own work. I was wondering, like, how have you found that experience? Like, obviously, adapting from your own work, it probably is quite easy because obviously you are the owners of it. You know what's going on inside your own head. But how did you find? How have you found the sort of the playtesting experience and creating your own RPG system?
One thing that occurred to me functionally when we first started putting together the game is that maybe specifically we're in the process of creating a giant sandbox that like filled with all kinds of quest hooks and all sorts of things. And that exercise for the game really opened doors for actual stories, like books that we want to write, or stories that we want to throw, Rickety Stitch's character in, or even new series that we're working on, because fleshing out the world really made it easy to put players into it, to put characters into it, locations and descriptions and other things going on that I found really helpful. Kind of like with what J.R.R. Tolkien did with language. He's like, I created these languages. They got to have some history, or else they have no meaning. And so then the Lord of the Rings, and the Hobbit suddenly emerged. And I'm seeing that as not that I'm comparing us to Tolkien, but it's the exercise of creating the place has really opened up my eyes as to new stories and stuff. And I think that's been really impactful.
In terms of playtesting, it's sort of been like a slow build since we released the beta version of the game in August. It was around Gen Con. And I ran 5 games, I think, on Gen Con weekend, which was exhausting. All of varying success. And after that, we have a Discord channel that you should join if you're interested in playing the game, to give your feedback, maybe find some other people to play. We're just starting to now, I think, get some good feedback from people at this point.
Took a couple of months for people to digest all the stuff and get their own groups and things going, but it's been cool to see people play the game.
We're also thinking towards a Kickstarter at the end of the year, so it's kind of this balance of getting everything ready and then absorbing feedback and changing things.
So from this experience then, from sort of getting this experience, and again, like I said, this, your own sort of histories of playing RPGs and stuff, and I appreciate when I ask this question, obviously I have to take into account of the last year, which has pretty much changed everyone's experience of role playing, because obviously we're all now locked in our houses and talking on online and stuff. But what would you say is your predictions, I guess, for RPGs or role playing games in the next 5-10 years or so?
That's a big question.
I think that remote play was already beginning to emerge. I know that Ben and we solely remote play. I haven't been in a room playing with anybody since, I guess every year we used to go on trips with our buddy Amir and Darren and others, and we'd go play D&D. But
it's been over a year since December, right before the pandemic.
And even that was for a couple of days, hanging out. But I think that playing remotely has already been emerging, and I think it's just going to grow in popularity and just, I think, convenience, because people are used to being home now, and the world is super uncertain. And
I wonder if games themselves will start reflecting that in the rules somehow, like streaming or just online play. I don't know how. It's not something that I feel comfortable designing, but it seems like that could be something.
Yeah, I definitely, for me, I only ever had really one game in person, and when I used to record one shots, I would actually go to them, to the people's places. I usually use a group of friends here, and that was more because I was it's a chance to see friends and stuff, and I've not seen anyone, we made a big effort for it. But now it's opened up a whole world of trying new things, and be hey, you're free Friday night, how about you do this? And having to accommodate for obviously screen time and people not wanting to be recorded and stuff. But it's actually been such an eye-opener for me, who's never really played that much online before this. And I think for me, the other big benefit, as you sort of alluded to there, Ben, is streaming stuff. It's now very easy to just click on a link or something and share what you're doing, and have people watch games that maybe don't have the same following as some of the big ones, but you can look up for, you see, someone's playing Land of Eam, someone's doing Sleepaway, someone's doing these indie RPGs, which are slowly becoming more and more popular because they're about connecting people together and they're about collaborative storytelling. And I think that's so important right now, being able to create a story when you're so far apart and you feel like a part of it. So yeah, I definitely feel that.
I just wonder if, D&D or another large company or, an indie game will say this is the streaming version of our game, which has streamlined rules, no pun intended, and rules for audience members, actual rules for audience members to, be involved in the game. Because I know people have their own rules, like, you contribute money or whatever, you can change the story or something like that. But I don't know. Seems like an opportunity to innovate.
I definitely think it might even get to the point where we don't roll anything and it is just collaborative storytelling and people being comfortable with that. Because I am, again, from my own experience, getting people to play a game with you where there's always that joke, isn't there? When you're playing the GM, you're half therapist, half goblin with a voice, and you have to balance all these backstories and stuff. And people get scared. People get scared of doing that and sort of thing.
Yeah,
but I think like if you're doing that storytelling thing and everyone comes together for it and trying it out, and I think with the safety of not being in the same room as people, like, oh, I could just leave whenever I want to. I mean, no one does that, thankfully. But I do think like there is something magical about being together online, telling a story, and sometimes you might go through sessions and not roll dice at all. It is just the way you're having a conversation with someone. I just think that is such a powerful thing, because obviously sometimes you think, well, if I'm seeing a play, I expect it to be perfect or to be written, and so they must know what they're saying. Or if you're, and that's it. That as we've all sort of discovered, role playing games, it's like improv. You're just coming up with stuff on the fly, but you know what your characters feel like, or you know what they want, and the success of a die doesn't necessarily dictate how they feel about it. Or how they might do something, might not succeed, but they can make the choice of whether they feel they succeeded or not. So, yeah, I hope for more games that do have maybe slimmed down rules. Hopefully, games with no combat, because I don't know how you folks feel about it, but I hate judging combat. Because I'm like, yeah, you hit them. I'm not going to flavor it. Yeah, you've done it. Hooray!
Yeah, I often find combat really boring.
One thing we want to do in Landed Veeam with combat is like not have hit point bloat. So characters don't gain hit points, which we call it courage. But you don't gain a level and then roll more hit points. You're basically the same courage level, like levels 1 through 10, unless you get a magical item that increases your courage or something like that, which is possible. But I think that's like the biggest thing that slows down combat in D&D. It's the fact that keep getting more hit points and you're able to, rest and just, you're kind of undoing the threat of death, like throughout a session by being able to heal so often. And as a GM, that's frustrating because you're trying to like have this balance of like, it should feel like danger. Right. I think, at least when I'm running it, you want to impart a feeling of danger. Like character death should probably be rare, but like the threat of it is interesting.
Well, you have that with the mechanics as well, for the death mechanics. So when you're reduced to 0 courage, you fall unconscious for a number of rounds, but then you get a chance to like resist a wound. Because obviously, if you're hit by something and you go down, it's going to have some sort of lasting impact, which I thought was good. But then the second time that happens, you roll, and I liked that there's a table which and it talks about like if you roll under a certain number, you make one last heroic action before your character dies. And I was like, wow, I like that. Like, you give that agency back to the players to do something, and they are creative rather than like, oh, you just bleed out.
So we have a funny story about this. It's the inspiration for this.
This
exists.
Go for it, please.
So we had this 3-year campaign in high school, and this was the final battle. I was a gnomish illusionist. We were like level 10 or something.
I have gone through this 100,000 times in my life. This is good.
And my character was decapitated in like the second to last round of the fight.
Oh my God.
So a rule like that would have been great to be like, you're decapitated, but before you die, you can like run the big bad through. Just to like give it some weight, because I felt like, wow, I made it right to the finish line, but now I'm dead. And like I think I had a ring of regeneration. It was like the only way I could be killed was decapitation.
Good.
After 3 years. But yeah, Ben is totally right. It's about like making even a character death something that is retold, because it is like, oh man, that amazing thing that happened, like right at that moment you earned it.
Definitely. No, I really like that. I guess what would be your main advice for anyone who wants to run a game that's in the Land of Veeam?
Well, you can download the game for free right now at drivethrurpg.com.
Functionally, have it
Functionally,
first.
yes. But inspirationally, advice like.
Yeah, I mean, obviously have fun with it. It's not, nothing is hard and fast. It's all about chasing the fun with Land of Eam. Like, what's the fun thing that happened that made everybody laugh or whatever? Chase that playing the game, because the mechanics are designed to reward you for chasing that. And I think that if you're constantly going in a circle around the conflicts in a fun way, or maybe you are a group that you encounter a fiend and you really do have to fight. You can, you can still fight, but chase the fun. There's so many things that can go wrong, and when everything goes wrong, that's when things get funny and amazing. That's my perspective.
And I guess this is sort of a functional answer again, but we tried to make the game like a low bar for entry for game masters in terms of prep. There's lots of random tables. There's 3 adventures you can choose from. There's a portion of the sandbox in the beta, and there's like a big hex map you can use. So like there's a lot of GM tools to get off the ground running. Whereas, if you get D&D or something, if you just get the book, then you're probably just gonna have to make stuff up or buy a published adventure. But this is free, okay? This is free.
So download it whenever you can, because it's pretty classic.
Right here on Drive-Thru RPG. Go now.
Right, but there are a lot of tools, and you can. Some cool ones are, there's like a dungeon generator, so you've got like obstacles and stuff like right out of the gate. The sandbox, the free little snippet of sandbox is great because it can kind of give you an idea of the tone of like what's going on, and it's easy to latch on to how people are talking or what they're doing or what kind of conflicts exist.
And you don't have to use it whole cloth. You can just take what you want.
These are just ideas that you can riff with. And the adventures are the same. Like, you can change out adventure stuff. They're meant to be super functional. There's not just like giant blobs of text that you have to digest and like, okay, and then this happens and how do I make that happen?
Yeah.
It's not like that. It's really fast and loose, and again, just trying to focus on chasing that fun aspect of RPGing with your pals.
For me, like, obviously I love a good table, so I like reading it all through and then obviously rolling and just having a seat. So for me, like, the dungeon traps and obstacles table was quite hilarious. Like, cause I rolled, it's called the Laughing Phasman or something like that, where it's about someone's guarding a door and they ask what is a good password, and then the party has to guess, I'll come up with a good password and the best one wins. And I was like, I like that. That's my sort of humor. And the crossbow chandelier was the other one. Was the chandelier just full of crossbows, like looking down. And obviously, if you go under it, you'll get shot. But if you dance under it, and you won't. But again, it's like just a little paragraph. You can just drop that in anywhere. And I was like, oh, I like that idea. You just have these traps just around, and then like, what could it be? And just having people to work out and go outside the box thinking. So yeah, I like stuff like that in the sense. So yeah, finding the fun in what could be typically like you're in a dungeon, it's dark and grim, but someone's asking you what is a good password, and you're like, what kind of riddle is this? I just want to know what a good password is, and then that weird back and forth because you're that expectations of the players, and then having to constantly readjust it, and then finding the fun in that. It's always second guessing. That's definitely, that's for me. I love that sort of thing.
We actually have like sort of this mini game. It's sort of a mini game, but it's a random dungeon, and you use a D12, and you're kind of gaining a currency. So if you're a GM, you don't have a dungeon prepared, but it comes up that, you have to go into this dungeon. You can just use this system with those tables, and you're kind of gathering keys, which is this currency. And once you get 5 of them, you like find what you're looking for, whatever that may be in the story. If you fail the roll, you just encounter one of those hazards, or you might encounter a hazard and get a key, or you just might find keys. So that's kind of what those were for. But as you're saying, you can just like use them, just take them for whatever you want,
Do you have any plans for the future? Is there any other projects in the pipeline that you're happy to talk about?
We've got a lot going on, actually. Of course, Land of Eam, like, we're in the beta. We intend to run a Kickstarter. The 3rd Rickety Stitch book drops in April. so you can continue that series and see what happens to our favorite skeleton bard. We're also working on a couple of middle grade series as well, which I won't share too much about. They're gated by our Patreon, like to see the more details. But one is a chapter book, middle grade chapter book, fantasy adventure. Another is another graphic novel series. And then as of like the last 48 hours, we've decided to throw our hat into Zine Quest on Kickstarter.
Nice.
And,
Amazing.
we're going to see what we can challenge ourselves to produce to
the next like 2 to 3 weeks.
In the next 2 to 3 weeks to see. But that'll be fun.
Nice.
God and I are like addicted to creating stuff, so sometimes we really we go too far. But
you always need a project on. I feel you on that front.
Yeah, right.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, both of you, so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you for the last hour or so. I just wanted to finally ask, where can we find your work? And are you on Twitter? Are you on what's your socials? Which is a terrible way of phrasing that sentence. I'm so sorry, but where can we find your work online?
Yeah, I mean, you can find it in lots of places. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, all at Rickety Stitch. Just search Rickety Stitch. Or if you are interested in Land of Eam and playing it, you can download it at DriveThruRPG or at our website, ricketystitch.com. And then, of course, if you are super interested in the more graphic novel series or more of the fiction that we're writing, you can check out some of the stuff and support us on Patreon. That's where we share that stuff. I recommend getting the beta. It's got a lot of stuff in it. It's free. All of it's a work in progress. And at the bottom of every page is a link to our Discord. So you can actually tell us like, hey, we really like this, or hey, I don't understand this. And Ben and I will personally answer all the questions and take in all the feedback.
I thought you were going to end that sentence. We will personally end you. It's like, okay, that's what I was like. Where's the sentence going?
I'll personally come to your house and slap you in the face.
Yeah.
No, we actually do want criticism and feedback of that nature just to get the game as best as it can be.
And then we'll launch the finishing game stuff in Kickstarter at the end of the year.
Excellent. Oh, well, I genuinely can't wait. I had so much fun running this for my friends who definitely found the joy in the role playing. I think I said at the beginning of it, and I was like, okay, it's been an hour. You might need to go through the door to start the adventure. And they're like, do we? Okay, time has passed. And they're like, no. But it was that joyous like railroading, but going, it's like, picking up the kittens and putting them into another basket and then getting them out of the basket. Which I love as that kind of players, that they enjoyed to going, oh, I guess we can talk for another 5 minutes. And then me going, now. And because I think what I love about the quick start adventures and stuff is that they were so easy to get into and so easy to just try out, and there was no pressure to get it right and no pressure to and then be like, yeah, I'll just skip out these bits, like, and I did that whole thing where I was, well, I'll just skip past that bit of my notes, and they're like, oh, what did we miss? And I'm like, can't tell you, and they're like, no.
Well, I can't wait to hear that.
Oh, well, I will send you a link no doubt. But thank you both so much for chatting with me.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'm hoping to do more of these special Q&A bonus episodes in future, including Q&As on the one-shots we've run here at What Am I Rolling? If you have a question or have a suggestion for an RPG designer you'd like to see interviewed on this podcast, let us know via our email address. That's whatamirollingpodcast@gmail.com. And that's it. Great. See you next time.